Hello, everybody, and welcome in to another episode of New England Sports Weekly. As always, I am your host, Sean Metcalf, and I am glad that you've decided to join me again. And we're back from our, I don't know if you want to call it sabbatical or hiatus, whatever you want to call it, but took a couple weeks off because, man, I was not feeling good at all. I felt like crap, to be honest. It was not good. I had no voice, so even if I tried to do a podcast the last couple of weeks, it would have sounded like shit. Let's be honest, it would not have. It would not have been fun. You guys would have. I would have gotten a lot of comments back just asking, like, what the hell is he even talking about? But we're back, feeling healthy, feeling better. Taking my antibiotics for my sinus infection. Just gotta take that before I go to bed. Actually, reminding myself. Remind me, everybody, in the comment section. But no, we're back. We're better than ever, and we're rolling just like your New England Patriots. Man, it's been exciting these last couple of weeks. It's been something. I mean, we haven't been able to talk about it here. I left you off the week of the Atlanta game because they had just beaten Cleveland and they were on the Thursday nighter to go play the Atlanta Falcons. So we've missed the Atlanta and the Tennessee game for you. But don't fear, we'll get into that. We'll dive into this Patriots hot stretch along with their matchup here against the Buffalo Bills, who the Patriots are playing for the division with. So we'll get into all of that here as we move along. But anyways, we'll jump into the out of the box segment here, as we always do, because we're not going to hesitate any longer. There's a lot of stuff to get to. And as we mentioned, the New England Patriots have won 6 in a row, taking on the Atlanta Falcons and the Tennessee Titans over those 2 weeks that I was away. And especially that Tennessee game, that was really the big one there. Is the Tennessee Titans were at the time were the number 1 seed in the AFC. Now, flash forward after their victory, they take over the 2nd overall seed in the AFC along with the division lead again. So things have really changed here. Patriots are atop the AFC East. They are 2nd in the AFC itself, and they're right there in the probably top 5 in the NFL in teams altogether. They're right there with the Buffalo Bills, right there with the Kansas City Chiefs, the Packers, and the Bucks. So that group of 5 or 6 teams right there, that's pretty much what territory you're living in right now as Patriots fans. So it's been a shock to the system, but a good shock to the system from that standpoint, if we're being honest. Now, one piece of news that did come out today around 5:30, 6 o'clock is that Kyle Duggar, the rising star in the secondary, the heavy hitter, he has actually tested positive, or actually I should say, yes, he's tested positive for COVID. Now, no ruling yet if he is one of the vaccinated players or not, because if you remember, vaccinated players, if they have the vaccine, if they get 2 negative tests within 24 hours, then they can still play in this weekend's game or Monday night's game. But we'll see how that goes for Kyle Duggar. So fingers crossed there. So far, knock on wood, there's been no positive tests or close case calls that the Patriots have had so far in the early going this week. But he will be missed because he's still got work to do as far as covering tight ends, but he's still developed into a rising star at safety, where that will be missed, covering some, like I said, some of those tight ends, some of those running backs, some of the in the middle of the field. He's really developed into a really good complement right now, and like I said, rising star to what Devin McCourty is. at the strong safety position. So it really will be disappointing to not have him there. And then on the flip side of things, the Buffalo Bills are going to be without star corner Tre'Davious White, who tore his ACL, so he will be out for the remainder of the season. So the Patriots do catch a massive break there for the Monday night game, and then from 3 weeks from now, after the Patriots have the bye and play the Colts, they will face the Bills again at home. So the Patriots do, like I said, they catch a huge break there that they don't have to end up playing they don't have to worry about Tre'Davious White in both of their matchups with Buffalo. Now, the Patriots, we'll get into this here a little bit further down the road or down the broadcast road, but the Patriots really don't have that number one receiver that a Tre'Davious White traditionally would be on. So it's not going to be really anything where, oh boy, we have Randy Moss, we have Justin Jefferson, we have T.O. or whoever. I'm just throwing out past and present. Yeah, I'm just throwing guys out there, DeAndre Hopkins, like that a Tre'Davious White would normally be on all night long. But still, if you're Buffalo, it was Tre'Davious White, and then it's a drop off at corner there. Not a massive drop off because they do have Edmonds, but still, it's you have a guy that was right there in the conversation the past couple of years with Stephon Gilmore and Jalen Ramsey for the best corner, and now throwing J.C. Jackson. So you right in that conversation for top 5 corners in the league. So that will be a big blow for the Buffalo Bills. And then looking at the Patriots, as we mentioned, they have won 6 in a row, coming off that win against Tennessee. So they really have control of their own destiny. So those are the big storylines as we look here for the Patriots moving into Week 12. I know it's hard to even fathom that we're this far into the season. It sounded just like yesterday I was talking to you guys about opening up against Miami. So it has been a fast-moving season, but that's the way it goes when you're having fun, especially this year with the Patriots in their unexpected 8-4 season. Now to another team that had a good unexpected season, a very surprising run to the American League Championship Series, we look at the Boston Red Sox, who have made 2 signings for their starting rotation or bullpen, however they choose to use these two. They did sign Michael Wacca, who, if you remember, was a stud with the St. Louis Cardinals when he first came up in 2013. He did, obviously, if you remember from the Red Sox run to the World Series championship in 2013, they played those exact same Cardinals, and they had to face Michael Wacca. At the time was throwing 97, 98 miles an hour and was one of the best rookie pitchers of his time. Things have kind of tailed off after he had about a 3-4 year run there with St. Louis where he made the All-Star team in 2015. Looked, like I said, had a good rookie year in 2013. So that 3-4 year run, he looked pretty good. Then he became a free agent, went to the New York Mets in 2020. Signed a 1-year deal, then went to Tampa last year, and really he did not impress me at all. He got his tits ripped in the American League Division Series against the Boston Red Sox. He just that's been my last impression of him, and he just seems to be one of those guys that I wouldn't call flash in the pan, because flash in the pan, I would reserve that till a 1-year wonder, maybe a 2-year at best. But this guy had a decent career there in St. Louis, had the All-Star appearance, had the good rookie year, was pretty solid for them. But really, since he went to the Mets and last year with St. Louis, with Tampa Bay, really wasn't all that great. He had a ERA over 5 last year with Tampa. So it's more of a project. See, maybe if you can rekindle a little bit of what he has, because he's still not that old. He's in his upper 20s to early 30s. So you're not getting a guy that's you're not getting a guy that's 33, 34 years old that you're like, well, just the minor league piece. You are getting a guy that's had good major league experience. Maybe you can rekindle something, but I'm not holding my breath there. Maybe you put him out the bullpen, but I really was not all that inspired with that. We'll touch on that more later. And then they also signed James Paxton, a former Mariner turned Yankee, turned back Mariner after his stint in New York didn't go all that great. But when he was healthy with Seattle, this one I'm a little bit more excited for. No, I wouldn't say I'm more lukewarm on it, I should say, because he does have more potential than Wacca. I mean, he was a strikeout machine in his days in his first stint with Seattle. Was thrown in the mid to upper 90s, has good off-speed stuff. Then injuries have come back to bite him in his time in New York. And last year he's recovering from Tommy John, as he got that back in actually May of this year. So it's been a rough ride the last 3 years here for James Paxton. But to me, he's got more upside than Wacca. But neither one of them I'm really gonna be super excited for. I mean, to be honest, it was kind of to be expected here with what the Red Sox already had in the starting rotation. I'm kind of holding out my breath here, maybe that they do something in the trade market, but I'm not gonna really be holding my breath on this one, other than maybe a couple seconds. But other than that, I'm not going to be super pumped, super jacked up right now for what they're going to do, especially with the CBA. That whole mess going on right now. So those were your big moves by the Boston Red Sox. Is they signed those two pitchers to their 1-year deals respectively. And then finally, to round out the out of the box segment, Jake DeBrusk, the ever disappointing Bruins first round prospect from the 2015 draft, is now requesting a trade, which I'm not surprised, but also at the same time, I mean, the Bruins really don't have much of a choice what to do at this moment, because they're stuck in a rock and a hard place. They have a player that wants out, a player that I thought they might try to trade in the offseason. And now their Bruins minor league system, the Providence Bruins, has been hit hard with the COVID bug, as they just have a bunch of players that have been riddled with COVID. And now Brad Marchand is suspended for 3 games because of a slew footing incident. So throw that in with the bad news for the Boston Bruins, as things just are not looking good between Marchand's suspension, COVID outbreak in their minor league system, and now Jake DeBrusk wants a trade. But because of all those situations, the Bruins might have to hold off on trading DeBrusk until Marchand comes back, or if they could get a major league and NHL player in return for Jacob DeBrusk. So we'll see how that rounds out here for the Bruins. But in the meantime, we'll see how that upsets the boat, rocks the boat there for the Boston Bruins. Now let's just jump right into it here when it comes to the New England Patriots. As we talked about off the top of the show, they are absolutely on fire. For a team that started the year 2-4 and 0-4 at home, now albeit they did play mostly the NFC with the Saints, which that one was surprising, the Tampa Bay Bucks and the Dallas Cowboys. So the Dallas Cowboys and Tampa Bay Bucks are, especially Tampa Bay, is the cream of the crop, defending Super Bowl champions. We all know how great Tom Brady is. We don't have to rehash all that. That loaded offense that they have, that defense, although now they are riddled with injuries, but still, before all the injuries hit, we're a top core, especially against the run. Good luck. Patriots decided not to even run against that team. They only ran, I believe, like 3 or 4 times. They didn't even bash their heads against the wall. So we all know how that ended for the Patriots in week 4. But for a team that started 2-4, played great competition, you saw what was coming down the pipe with the not San Diego, but the Los Angeles Chargers. And then throw in the Cleveland Browns, 2 games against Buffalo, the Tennessee Titans, the Indianapolis Colts, who are coming on strong. And you looked at that situation where, all right, this is going to be a rock fight, and do the Patriots have enough here to compete with these teams? And at the time, when you're 2-4, you have a rookie quarterback who, don't get me wrong, I love, and listen, I've been a total convert. You all know, if you've been following the podcast, wanted Justin Fields. He has not looked great this year, although you can probably blame that largely on that coaching staff and Matt Nagy in just a lack, well, I shouldn't say lack of weapons, because they do have Allen Robinson and Mooney, but really the coaching staff has mangled that whole situation in Chicago. So anyways, I digress. You all know I was a Justin Fields guy, but Mac has really won me over. I am 100% behind Mac. He is the future of this franchise, but still, you thought after the 2-4 start, you're like, all right, maybe you can compete for a wild card spot. Maybe you can try to sneak in there, because you thought Buffalo was going to run away with this thing in the division. And then the NFL season happened, because this, folks, has been one of the most unpredictable NFL seasons I have maybe ever seen. It seems like every other week you get at least one heavy favorite that goes down in a major upset, at least one, and then you get 2, maybe 3 a week, or 1 or 2 to 3 during every other week that ends up going down. I mean, let's go back, rewind this back 3 weeks ago. You had the Buffalo Bills losing to the freaking Jacksonville Jaguars. I mean, come on. The Jacksonville Jaguars, a team that is led by that boob of a head coach in Urban Meyer, who, when he's not coaching that team, is up in his bar in Ohio doing God knows what up there. And that whole situation down there. So that's I would not want to be a player down in Jacksonville. And then you have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers losing to the Washington football team. I caught myself there. Almost did it, folks. But I called them the WFT. So you had them losing to WFT. And then you had the Tennessee Titans losing to the Texans. Oh man, the freaking Texans! You lost to them. So you've had some major upsets here over these past 3 weeks combined. So it has just been bonkers this year how things have gone for the NFL across the board. Now it's basically been a season of you just have to avoid having one of those gigantic upsets. Everybody, or at least it seems like every team has one. And I don't know if the Patriots you'd put in that Saints game, because New Orleans has been in the hunt for the playoff spot. So for a while they were 5-2, 5-3. So they look decent, but I wouldn't put them in that category. Probably Miami, but Miami's surging, so it's hard to put it in there. They really have. Like, obviously, they own the Jets this year. They crushed them, especially in that home game. So they really haven't had that dud, per se, against a really bad team. But it's been one of those years. So for this Patriots team to go 2-4, you thought, all right, let's try to squeak into a wild card spot. But they have just absolutely laid the bricks on these other teams. They've absolutely been an absolute unit out there, especially defensively and with that running game. They've been a physical football team all around on offense and defense. But of course, Mac Jones has been you don't even think he's a rookie anymore. He's been that good. So they've just had a whole stew of just greatness that's been brewing here over these past 6 weeks. And especially if we fast forward to this past week, playing against Tennessee. Now, I know everybody wants to sit here, or not everybody, but I know there's a section of Patriots Nation that wants to sit here and say, okay, so the Patriots have beat the Browns when the Browns they didn't have Odell Beckham Jr. They lost out there. They didn't have Kareem Hunt or their starter Nick Chubb. You didn't have two of the better backs in the league because of one a COVID and one a calf injury. But still, you had D'Ernest Johnson, who ripped up 146 yards in a Thursday night game, and then of course he comes in and rushes for close to 100 yards. It was actually 99. And then, but that Cleveland team still has, no matter what you want to say about Baker, he's still a solid quarterback. He's still a quarterback that took that Browns team to the playoffs last year, got them out of the wild card round, brought them into the divisional round against Buffalo, and gave Buffalo all they could handle. I thought they were going to take down Buffalo. Excuse me, not Buffalo. I thought they were going to take down Kansas City. They were close to taking down KC. So it's still a good team. It was a team that made the playoffs last year. Then people want to bring up the injuries. Then you want to bring up then against Atlanta. Well, I'm not saying Atlanta's a good team, but they want to bring up that they were missing their top weapon in Calvin Ridley. And then you go to the Buffalo game. You don't have Derrick Henry. You don't have A.J. Brown. You don't have Julio Jones. But still, they're still all good teams. We're still talking about really good teams here, folks. We're not talking about facing the Jets without Zach Wilson and Corey Davis type of situation, or going to Jacksonville and they're missing a bunch of players or something along those lines. We're still talking about good teams, that 8-3 team there in Tennessee. So yes, did they have a little bit of a struggle there in the first half where they should have been up 21-7 at the half if they had punched in a couple of those field goals and they kept that long 46-yard run by the backup running back for the Titans? Yeah, should have. But still, they were able to, in the end, pull it out because you still have a quarterback. I know this has been a down year for Ryan Tannehill, and I know everybody here in New England wants to look back at Ryan Tannehill's days in Miami and point back to those. And listen, I was a victim of that up until last year, and then he really showed me last year that he's turned this around. So after having 3 good seasons in Tennessee, I mean, he's really changed my opinion of him. So he's a quarterback that's proven that he can run that offense, and they still have running backs that combined for over 274 yards. Now, it obviously it's not Derrick Henry, so you're a little more pissed off that they let a team that had not even their number 2 running backs, because their number 2 was injured for that game, so he wasn't even there. So you're looking at Devonta Foreman, and then also Felton as well. So you're looking at a situation where you have your third and fourth, but still both of them had good skill sets. I did like Foreman coming out of Texas, but anyways, still you have a team that has a really good offensive line. You're not talking about some Tennessee team that was just scratching by and got to 8-3 on its own, and it's not all just Derrick Henry. So you're talking about a pretty good team that has a good defense as well. And we saw that when they got into the red zone against the Patriots. The Patriots struggled in the red zone. They were able later in the game wear them down and score, but this wasn't a game where, yes, the Patriots won by 23, that you're sitting there and being, all right, they absolutely dominated. There were areas that they needed to fix, but still, you beat the teams that you needed to beat that were above you. You beat, at the time, Cleveland, who you were fighting for a wild card spot. You leapfrogged them. You beat the Chargers out in LA, who you were jockeying for in the wild card spot when obviously the AFC West is a whole situation. But you knew you had to beat them because you were going to be in the mix with them for a wild card spot if they didn't win the division. You were going to be in the mix with Cleveland for a wild card spot. And then, of course, with the Titans, they're ahead. And then when you fast forward to last week with the Titans, because of what the Patriots have done and put themselves in position of before Buffalo when they were won a half a game ahead with Buffalo, and then Buffalo won, so they were tied. So basically, you were either in the lead or tied for the division for 2 weeks, and then you had an opportunity to even jump further ahead, not just in the division but in the conference, and you did it. You've taken care of it. So each step that each check mark, each obstacle that you put in front of this Patriots team, be it offensively, be it defensively, they've emphatically answered that, at least in my book, at least in most situations. Now, again, was it all perfect? No, but if we look at this, we break this down. I mean, over this 6-game run where they've turned their season completely upside down in the best way possible, when the evil empire, the Patriots, have said, we're back in an emphatic way, what they did was basically early in the season, their defense wasn't great, wasn't good. I know Dallas laid the hammer on you, but Dallas has a really good offense. But the only team that you ironically played great against was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but everybody else, it was lackluster. I didn't see great. You absolutely shit the bed against the Saints. It just has not been, or I should say, those first 6 games, even in the win against the Texans, it was all just just some garbage that they were throwing out there. But finally, they turned it around against the Chargers. They were able to make Justin Herbert, even though the Chargers put up 17 points, they made him look pedestrian, at least in my book. The Patriots are the one team that the all-world quarterback who, I mean, I would take Justin Herbert in a heartbeat. As much as I love Mac, Justin Herbert I would put above him. I would take him any day of the week. He looked pedestrian against the Patriots. He was missing some wide open throws. And then you look against, then you go up against Cleveland. You only give up the 1 touchdown, and you manhandled that offense as far as the Patriots defense was concerned. And then you go down to Atlanta. You give up a goose. You put a goose egg up on that Atlanta offense. Then you look at the Tennessee Titans game. You made Ryan Tannehill look pedestrian. So obviously I know the Titans ran for 5,000 miles, it seemed like, in that game, but still, the more important part, when the Titans were down, when they couldn't afford to run anymore, you made Tannehill look average, even more average than he is. So you really have seen a complete turnaround here from especially that defense, where I was probably one of the biggest detractors of that defense as far as the Patriots were concerned early on in the season, because this was a team that spent a lot of money. You brought in, well, Matthew Judon, we'll put him aside because all year long he's been great. But you put in money with those defensive tackles. You brought in Godchow and Henry. You lost Henry for the year. Godchow was okay at the beginning. You brought back Van Noy. You brought back Jamie Collins. What was it, week 5, week 6? Shortly after that, it looked okay. It looked okay there defensively, but nothing you want to write home about other than Matthew Judon, where from Jump Street, Matthew Judon looks like he's been the biggest bargain that the Patriots have ever, even though they paid a boatload of money, he's just been absolutely worth every penny that they paid him. So that way you might make an argument for a bargain, but still he's been worth everything that they paid him. But other than that, at the beginning of the season, it was just awful. They just didn't put out a good product there defensively. Then, like we just talked about, they played really well against the Chargers. They played well against Tennessee. They played well against the Falcons and the Browns. And it's just been an absolute turnaround, and they've turned themselves into a top 5 defense, hell, even a top 2 defense in this league. I can't think of a defense that I honestly rather would have other than the Patriots. I mean, this defense is on fire. Now, looking at what's happened, you've had guys like Matthew Judon, who you brought in, who have really he's been that linchpin of that defense. I thought that when the season started, I thought the linchpin was going to be having Stephon Gilmore there to pair with Judon, but I mean, you haven't missed Stephon Gilmore at this point in the season, and Matthew Judon has been an absolute horse, along with Christian Barmore. Those two on that front seven have absolutely been nightmares. Now, the knock on Barmore coming out of college was that maybe he didn't have that super high of a motor. He was one of those guys, you heard stories that coaching staff at Alabama had to motivate him a little bit more, but it's been completely the opposite. You've heard that he's had a high motor here. He's been willing to study. He's always hanging out around with the teammates. He's always trying to get better. So I don't know where those stories came from at Alabama. I don't know if that was one of those situations where maybe somebody was trying to knock him down lower in the draft. I don't know, but you never know when it comes to those things. You've heard all kinds of rumors and stories about those situations around the draft time. But in my opinion, he's been, after Mac Jones, he has been an absolute steal. Getting him in the second round at number 38. He's caused so much havoc. He eats up space, and then when he's not eating up, even when he's eating up space, he's still pushing guys back in the line and open up all these holes. So it's not like he's just taking up space and just letting guys go around. He's eating up space and absolutely still pile driving these guys backwards. And then when he's not doing that, he's getting through those gaps. He's causing pressure. He's got quarterbacks to rush, where he's getting into the backfield and causing havoc. And now, obviously, he's still kind of playing on a little bit of a bigger rotation, albeit. But this coming from a guy that you thought might have to redshirt a little bit because you had Henry, who was going to play with Godchow, but Henry's out for the year, and it's no offense to Henry, because I saw him. He's a good football player, but that opened up the door for Barmore, and he has taken full advantage of it. And obviously, if it wasn't for Micah Parsons and Patrick Surtain out in Denver, if it wasn't for those two, Barmore might win that defensive rookie of the year. But nonetheless, he's been an absolute stud. We talked about Matthew Judon. He's absolutely come in here, changed the culture of this defense from what it was the last couple of years. And he has been all grit and heart, and he's not just a pass rusher, even though he's already has 10.5 sacks and is probably going to obliterate the Patriots single season record. He is amazing to go out there and watch. He goes out there, he'll set the edge, he'll stop the run. So he's a complete player, and I'm sure Belichick is all giddy every time he makes his defensive game plans, what he can do with Matthew Judon. Now, if we look in that linebacking core, which looked like they were slower to start the season, they looked like they found a little bit of the fountain of youth as far as Hightower and Van Noy. They've gotten back to them, not maybe their old selves that they really once were, but they found a little bit more. Instead of being 70% of what they used to be, they're probably up to 85-90% of what they used to be. So you have two linebackers that might be a little long in the tooth, but they certainly aren't showing it right now. They're helping that middle of that defense, and with Van Noy at times he can rush the edge. Now, one guy that you are missing, who I was excited for this year, who's on that short-term IR, is Josh Uche. Hopefully, in the next couple of weeks we can get Josh Uche back, and that will even be a bigger boost to this defense. And then the secondary. This is one area that was probably the area that I was probably more critical early on in the year, mainly because some of those guys that they brought in, i.e. the Green Goblin himself, and excuse me, he has not. At the beginning of the year, man, when they signed the Green Goblin, I was not all that Not all that happy because Jalen Mills, I was throwing that out there. I was trying to think of, I knew his nickname was the Green Goblin, and I was blanking on his name. But yes, Jalen Mills, folks. He was the one that I wasn't too high on when they brought him in. And then early on the season, there were times where he was getting absolutely torched. And to be honest, to be fair, after Gilmore, they traded Gilmore and they had injuries to Jonathan Jones. He's playing a lot more at corner than I thought. And I think now he's getting more accustomed to it. He still will get burned at times. Don't get me wrong. I'm not building him up to be an all-pro. He's a solid player, but he's not a great player. So that was one of the things that I was not happy with early on with that secondary. It looked like maybe Devin McCourty and some of those older players might be starting to see the end of the road, but McCourty has picked it up again. I mean, especially over the last couple of games, he helped tip that ball that J.C. Jackson picked off. So he's looking like he's found it again. Kyle Duggar, who we talked about, probably will miss this. Well, won't say probably, but it's not looking good at the moment because they're testing positive for COVID. But Kyle Duggar, who last year everybody made fun of because they took a D2 school prospect out of Lenore Ryan that came out at 24 years old, and we're like, oh, that's a pretty old rookie. But he's looked really good here. He's developed into a stud at that free safety position. So he's really come along. But of course, the biggest thing for me, outside of Matthew Judon with this whole, well, right there with Christian Barmore and Matthew Judon, one of the other biggest stories to come out of this defense has just been J.C. Jackson. So J.C. Jackson is really showing that he is a number one corner. Now, where you want to slot him in that whole conversation, that's probably, he's at least a top 5 as far as ranking him. That's for another show. But really, he's shown that he's a number one corner in this league now. After I even thought, even coming into the season, I know there's some lists that listed him as like the 11th best, 12th best corner, right outside that top 10. I think even one list had him at number 9. But I never bought into he was a true number one. I thought he was always a high level number 2 when you paired him with a number 1 with like Gilmore. But he's really proving to be that he can shut guys down. He's starting to turn into that guy. Now, obviously, the biggest test here will come against the Buffalo Bills because this will be the best receiver that he's probably seen since the Tampa Bay game. Well, since Dallas and Tampa Bay. They really haven't had a challenge because a lot of guys have been injured. Obviously, if you had A.J. Brown and Julio Jones, that you could have thrown that in there. But since the Dallas and since the Tampa game, this will be the biggest challenge that he's had since then. And last year didn't end well for J.C. Jackson. So this is where to put the stamp on it to show that, all right, I've turned the corner here, will be to see how he guards Stephon Diggs. Now, I'm not saying you got to hold Stephon Diggs down to two or less catches for 20 to 30 yards, but I'm saying like if you can hold him down to five catches for 60 yards, no touchdowns, then I'll take that, because if he's not getting those touchdowns and he's below 100 yards, he's the main focus of that Bills offense, because it's a pass-heavy offense that Buffalo has. They do not run the ball. So if he can play well against them, then I will be thoroughly impressed. Really, the defense has really been the key cog to this whole turnaround here, just how well they've played and just how physical they've been too, not just the counting stats, but just how physical that they've been at the line of scrimmage. Just not outside of this Tennessee game, they really have been pounding that line of scrimmage and really have been getting to the backfield, causing havoc. So it's really been impressive to see what they've done here over the 6-game stretch, and hopefully they can keep this up. Now, if you go to the offensive side of the ball, they found their own brand of physicality, mainly in running the ball, along with Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson. Now, we all knew that Harris was a pretty good back. We all knew that the Patriots took him out of Alabama in 2019. He had a redshirt rookie year. Last year was his first year of actual play for the Patriots, where he ended up rushing for over 600 yards. He had some injuries, so he probably would have got closer to 800, maybe even 1,000 last year. But he really showed that he can be a lead back, or at least can be pretty close to a lead back. And then the Patriots this year kind of had everybody scratching their head. You're like, well, you have Harris at the time before you traded Sony Michel. You have Sony Michel on his last year. Then you have James White, who you brought back. You have Brandon Bolden and J.J. Taylor. But then you brought in the Stevenson kid, who at the time in college was 245, pushing 250. So he's like a LeGarrette Blount back. So you're like, maybe you brought him in for that power back situation, goal line situation. But he's honestly surprised a lot. And not just because of the speed or that type of those attributes that you didn't think were going to be there for a big guy, but just his ability to also run routes and catch balls, which I think he needs to get more of that. They tried it a little bit here, but in the short amount that I've seen, he's done pretty well. I think he should start to eat into some of Brandon Bolden's work. But on top of being a good route runner, a good receiver, like I said, he's more than just a power back. He's got speed. He's got agility. Just go back to the Atlanta game. Now, it was a run that didn't end up counting because of a hold, but the hold occurred in an area where he didn't really get a lot of help, where he made a cutback, looked like he was going to go the other way. Then there was a lineman right in his face. He cuts back to the right side of the field, makes a few guys miss, and it would have been a 40-plus yard run. And if it stood, it would have got him close to 100 yards on the night. And who knows? They might have kept him in, might have punched in for that touchdown. But that just that run alone shows you just the athleticism, the skill, the speed, along with the power that he has. And in that Atlanta game, he showed some toughness. And in the Cleveland game, also, the Cleveland game was the main course, because that's where you didn't have Damian Harris because of that, because of the injury. So he was the main back in the Cleveland game, and he absolutely destroyed in that game. He had a hell of a night. He ended up having over 120 yards of total offense in that game. Excuse me. Yeah, so if we go back to the Cleveland game, he had 100 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns, and then he had 14 yards on 4 receptions. So we're talking about a guy who, in his rookie year, he's made an impact on this offense already. And I know I've gone on and on here about Stevenson, but he really has impressed me. To be honestly, I think he's shown more ability than Harris. And don't get me wrong, Damian Harris is a good back. If they didn't have Stevenson, I would be fine with having Damian Harris. Obviously, if you couldn't get a guy like Christian McCaffrey or Derrick Henry or Alvin Kamara, if you didn't have one of those guys, Damian Harris, to me, I would be good with that, because you have a pretty good solid back. But now mold those two guys together, you have a really good back in Harris, and you have a guy that I think eventually is going to be maybe not this year, maybe you start to see it more next year. But I think this is where Ramondre Stevens could turn himself into a 3-down running back and really take control of this group. But I think together, though, it's going to be a nice 1-2 punch that they have. And they're both physical backs. So that's the other part, too. They both run with physicality and anger and just punish the linebackers, punish that secondary once they get into that second level of the defense. It's been so fun to watch them. And, of course, we can't go by without talking about Mac Jones, who, yes, we talked about the physicality of where the Patriots have really gone to that run-first team. But I wouldn't call them 2012 Seattle. Now, 2012 Seattle, when you had a rookie in Russell Wilson, excuse me. Give me just a second here, folks. Let me grab some agua. But no, as far as Mac Jones, that I'm not gonna put this in the 2012 category of Seattle where they were Marshawn Lynch and pretty much Russell Wilson at the time before he became Russell Wilson was just kind of more the passenger to that situation, but was really riding shotgun sidecar to that running game as far as on the offense. I'm not going to go that far because Mac Jones to me has even shown more than Russell did in that first year where he's now don't before you start looking at Russell the last couple of years, we're talking about 2012 Russell. To me, Mac Jones has really shown that at times he can win you games if he needs to. Now that look at the throw to Kendrick Bourne in the Cleveland game. Excuse me. He threw a dart between two defenders where only Kendrick Bourne could get it. And he jumps up and it's like a half yard from the end zone, comes down in the end zone, touchdown, a beautiful touchdown pass. It was about a 20-some-odd yarder. What a dart. And then the ultimate, I can take this team and win, was last week against Tennessee. Now, if you look at the counting stats, the runs, the Patriots were able to run that in the fourth quarter with both backs. But early on in the first half, the third quarter, the Titans weren't allowing anything on the ground. They're a good rushing defense. But the Patriots were on offense able to put the ball in Mac's hand, albeit in a few occasions they weren't able to punch it in the first half as many times as you would like. But he did go down that first drive. He throws that beautiful pass where only, again, in this case, his guy Kendrick Bourne can get it in the corner of the end zone. It was a difficult catch to make. Bourne comes down with it, a beautiful throw, beautiful catch. So you saw Mac was able to do that. And then if you look later on in that game, he was able to drive them down on the red zone. A few times they weren't able to finish. There's one throw that if you ask Mac if he could have it back, it was to Hunter Henry, but they still had a chance to win it there. And then he throws another beautiful pass to Kendrick Bourne on just a check down. Bourne does the rest, but it was just more not from the standpoint of Mac Jones wasn't trying to make the big flashy play. He saw Kendrick Bourne open on the second touchdown pass where he hits that check down out route that Bourne was running. Should have been maybe an 8-yard gain, stop him, maybe get the first down, and then he turns into a 41-yard touchdown run. So Mac was able to, when the running game wasn't working, he was able to march them down the field, get them in a position to get some touchdowns, get them in position to kick the field goals, where I know field goals aren't sexy, but we all remember Tom Brady was able to do that in 2001. And now we're only talking about 2001 Tom Brady, where he was able to take that team, maybe not get a ton of touchdowns, but he was able to at least get them into scoring range, get field goals, get points on the board. And Mac was able to do that. Again, along with the rest of the team, Mac Jones, every time you give him a test, he passes it. And there'll be times in the game where he'll make you want to scream at times, make you want to just pound the table, where he had a pick. He threw a pass in that third quarter where it should have been a pick six. But luckily, defender drops it and it doesn't come back to haunt him. You're good. You're fine. Nothing to see here. Go home. So Mac Jones has really been special. He's been a guy, I'm not going to put him in the MVP race, but he's definitely, to me, I think he's getting closer and closer to wrapping up the Offensive Rookie of the Year, where we're not just talking about a game manager. We're talking about a guy where, yes, maybe there's some games where he does just enough to manage, but there have been other games where he's made those throws. Just look at even Dallas. The Dallas game where they had to score the 29 points. he ends up throwing that touchdown after he throws the pick six. So he comes right back and finds Kendrick Bourne for that 74-yarder. So, and then, like I said, we look at the Tennessee game where he was asked to basically put the offense on his back in that game until the fourth quarter, really, where the running game was able to crank it up. So he's really been a guy that he's been the field general. He's been out there. He's been a guy that's been reliable, been a guy that can win you some games if you ask him to. So really have been impressed with Mac Jones this year. So really during this 6-game stretch, it's just been them finding their identity, being a physical, tough football team. And when they need to, they can lean on Mac, but really it's been a good complement of physical football along with situational gameplay by Mac Jones, where if you need him to, he can win you that game. So it's just been a brand of physicality on both sides of the ball that's really been their calling card, if you want to put it there. But again, they're not a one-trick pony, because every time you say, oh, they're a power football team, they're a running football team, they're a physical football team, people don't think about the quarterback. But Mac Jones has shown he's been tough this year. Mac Jones has shown that he can win you that he can win you games. So it's not a put down calling them a power team. They are a good football team that has multiple ways. Maybe we're not obviously talking about 2004 through 2018-19 Patriots, where Brady really opened up the playbook later on in his career type of versatility. But no, we're talking about a team where you do have some versatility on offense. So I don't want people to think that that's a put down to say they're a power football team. It just means that's what they do first. But Mac Jones is still good enough where even when you want to focus mainly on the run, is you have to abandon it like you did against Tennessee. He can go in there and he can win you games. So I'm not overly concerned when it comes to this Patriots team regarding that. Now, just looking at Buffalo here, you have to go on the road to play the Buffalo Bills in Orchard Park, and it's going to be cold. It's going to be maybe some precipitation up there in Buffalo. It's friggin' Canada almost. Yes, I know it's in New York, folks. I'm just kidding. But you're going to Western Pennsylvania, Western New York, Upper New York this time of year. Sucks. It's cold. It's like being here, but maybe a little bit colder. Nothing else to do. You got all those rowdy fans throwing dildos out onto the field. So you got that rowdy fan base you have to deal with, and this is good. And I know we're laughing about all that, but really this is going to be the first time all year that the Patriots have been actually gone to a opposing road stadium where you have a hostile fan base, because after even going out during the 6-game win streak, the road games that you've had, it was Los Angeles, and it was more Patriots fans than it was Chargers fans. So, I mean, you really haven't been to a hostile environment this year, which has been kind of strange. So, you will go to one here in Buffalo. Like I said, they'll be throwing strange objects out onto the field, and let alone you have to deal with one of the better teams in the conference. Now, looking here at this Buffalo team is more one-dimensional than anything else. They're great at what they do, because Josh Allen has turned himself into an MVP candidate, and you have Stephon Diggs, one of the better receivers in the league. But still, they don't run the ball. Last week, I believe it was a maximum of 12 runs. And that's split up with Devin Singletary and Zach Moss. Both of those running backs are just nothing special. They don't balance out their offense. We're not talking about the Patriots here. We're not talking about, even you look at a team like the Packers or the Bucks, who have great quarterbacks, but they understand the balance. This Buffalo team, it's just pretty much, it's chuck it up in the air, and we're gonna try to win by passing it, and we're not gonna try to fool you running the ball, running all these play actions. It's pretty much you're talking about passing the ball. I mean, like I said, Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, and Cole Beasley, and Emmanuel Sanders, and Gabriel, they're all good. I mean, they're good at what they do, but still, this is a Buffalo team that if you could force them to, I mean, super force them into being one dimensional. I mean, you take away those 8 runs, and it's pretty much pass, 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 pass. Especially with this defense the Patriots have. No, it's going to be a tough game. Don't get me wrong, but if you're able to pin your ears back, if you get in those second down and long, third and long situations, and if you're able to take Stephon Diggs out, because Diggs is going to be the big key. Because if you take Diggs out, then you're just telling Josh Allen, who is a good running quarterback, that you're going to have to run, and try to force feed this into some of your slot receivers in Sanders and in Cole Beasley. Other than that, you're pretty much looking at a situation where it's like, all right, if you're, and again, if you're able to take away Stephon Diggs, then you're really putting the Bills in a even tougher spot than the one-dimensional offense they have is. And like we talked about earlier, there's no, there's no Tre'Davious White. Sorry, folks, probably still getting over this stupid cold, or sinus infection. But anyways, Tre'Davious White is out of this game. So defensively, your best weapon is gone. So it's going to make things harder for you against this Patriots offense, which, like I said earlier, they don't have the one weapon that really you have to key in on. So in a situation where White probably would have been going around, depending on the situation, to probably Myers, probably Bourne switching on and off there, maybe a few times with Nelson Aguilar, but really now you're looking at a Buffalo team that you're going to have to win by getting pressure on Mac Jones, forcing him into those long situations, forcing him to make a mistake. And really, Buffalo's front seven I like, but after Tre'Davious White, the remainder of that defense, to me, the remainder of that secondary, outside they have Tremaine Edmonds, but other than Edmonds, there's really nothing that I look at that secondary with the loss of White, and I'm like, okay, that scares me. But it's more that front seven with Rousseau and Hughes that you have to worry about for Buffalo. So that's more or less what I'm worried about, is that Buffalo front seven. So I think this is a situation where the Patriots have shown that they're a physical team. They're able to run the ball really well, where they can exploit that against Buffalo, because I think Buffalo has gotten exposed over the last couple of weeks. I know Jonathan Taylor is in the MVP conversation. They absolutely ripped them a new one, but still, this is a Buffalo team that really hasn't had to face a lot, especially when they played Miami twice. They played the Jets twice. They played some scrub teams that haven't had good run games. That's where they boosted those stats against. So I think the Patriots, with that dual threat of Harris and Stevenson, they'll be able to attack that Buffalo set front, and they'll be able to do it well. So with their running backs, at least that's my opinion. So I don't think this is a blow up by any means, that this is going to be a hard fought game, but I just think the Patriots' ability to run the football is just going to be so much better than what Buffalo is going to bring to the table in the run game, that it's going to be hard for Buffalo to slow this down as we get further into this game. And I think the war of attrition just takes over, where the Patriots end up winning 24-17 against Buffalo. They get that late field goal in the game to go up by 7 points, and they end up winning this game. So it'll be interesting to see how this Monday night game unfolds, and then they go on their bye week, come off the bye, and then have to face the Indianapolis Colts, and then have another game against the Buffalo Bills. So this gauntlet stretch here is starting to wind down. But as you get to the last 3 games, you have probably your toughest 3 against 2 with Buffalo and 1 with Indy, who's really surging. And we'll talk about Indy next week on the show. But right now, you have to focus on the Buffalo Bills, who, if you win, then you jump a game and a half ahead of them in the division, and you're really starting to put the clamps on Buffalo. If you're able to, you have to at least split the series with Buffalo. And if If you can sweep, even better. But it would be a nice start to go out on the road where they've been absolute road warriors this year and absolutely killed it. So we'll see if they can continue those winning ways out on the road in Buffalo. Now, as we look to the Boston Red Sox, who, as we last left them off after the offseason started, really were slow, didn't partake in any of the big offseason acquisitions. Now, they did end up signing over the last couple of days Michael Wacca, the former Cardinal and former Met and Ray, to a 1-year, $7 million deal, which I thought was a little steep for a guy that got paid $3 million last year and had a 5.3 ERA. Wasn't really psyched about that one. And then you signed James Paxton to a 1-year, $10 million pact, which he's still going to be rehabbing from Tommy John here. He had it back in May. So if you go and do the full year out, maybe you get him back kind of on the Chris Sale timeline, July, August area, maybe, if you're lucky. So, I mean, that's a lot to pay a guy to rehab. But again, if you can get him and he's an impact arm, or at least gives you something in July and August, from a guy who has had a career high strikeout rate, then I think it would be a decent move to bring in Paxton. Now, of course, I still think you can't just rely on just those two moves in here in the offseason. What I would really like to see the Boston Red Sox do is call up the Oakland Athletics. Call up Billy Beane, call him up and just see if you can get Sean Manaea. He's the guy that I really would love to see, is to get Sean Manaea. And if you could get Sean Manaea, put him in there with Nathan Eovaldi, and if Chris Sale comes back and if he can show that he is fully back from Tommy John and he's not just what he looked like over this stretch where he had some inconsistencies, but if you get the true Chris Sale back, the pre-Tommy John Chris Sale, along with Eovaldi, and then you were able to get Sean Manaea and Nick Pivetta, and then you can sort it out how you want to handle the back end of the rotation, if you want Michael Wacca to be there, or if you want that to be Tanner Houck's position, which I would be in favor of Tanner Houck being in that rotation. So, and if Tanner Houck can learn to stretch it out, then, man, you would have an actually pretty good rotation there if you were able to trade for one of those Oakland starters. Now, Manaea is my preference, but if you get any of the others out in that rotation, I'm not going to be upset. But to me, he'd be my favorite. Of course, he'd be the more expensive one. But I still would love to see them try to pry away Manaea out from the Athletics and really lengthen that out. And then, of course, I would love to see them try to get some bullpen arms as well, because they really are in need a lot to boost up the back of that bullpen. Because because in my opinion, I think you should keep Whitlock in that closer's role or that late innings role, because I think he's really thrived in that. I know you want him to be a starter, and that's what he was for most of his career until this year when he was rehabbing. But I think he showed a lot of promise out in that bullpen. He showed that he could trust him in high leverage situations. Now, was he perfect? No. But I think he showed enough where if you give him another year in high leverage situations, you're going to have a pretty good reliever. So if you can start to add some other pieces around him in that bullpen, which I thought they should have gone after the former, well, he was with Seattle and then was with the Houston Astros there, the closer that was on the market for a while. I really thought that they should have signed him. And actually, some news that just came across the board is the Red Sox have agreed to a 1-year deal with Rich Hill. So the Red Sox, well, I mean, I don't mean to laugh at Rich Hill, because I mean he actually has been a pretty good pitcher in his older age, but it just seems like the Red Sox are adding a lot of these old or these 1-year contracts, try to throw some darts against the wall and see what sticks with their rotation. I mean, you're not. You're in a weird spot because you have Chris Sale, and you have Nathan Eovaldi, but it's a situation where I'd like to see them get like a number 3 starter to put in this rotation to get another solid arm to put in there. Now, of course, what I loved them, the dream situation would have been Max Scherzer or Justin Verlander, one of those two veterans, and get him on a 2-3 year deal. But I mean, Max Scherzer just went for a 3-year deal for $130 million with $42 million guaranteed. So it really hasn't been, I mean, it really wasn't feasible for the Red Sox to go do that. I mean, $42 million for a guy that's going to pitch 5 innings, 6 innings a night. Now, don't get me wrong, Max Scherzer is a Hall of Famer. He's a guy that I would take any day of the week, but just, I mean, that's a lot of money. It's to just go out there and be like, okay, you take this. So I don't agree with giving him that much money. So we'll see how this all goes here. But yeah, I mean, it was, for me, they're just, I would rather see them go out here, spend the money on their bullpen, and they're trying to get some other starting rotation help. And there are really, where I was thinking of was Kendall Graveman, who went to the White Sox, who actually, that was a cheap deal for 3 years for $24 million. So that was something I was kind of hoping that the Red Sox would get involved in, was to go after that. They were rumored a lot with, it always seems like this time of year, the Red Sox, because of they're a big market team, they always get rumored for, oh, this guy and that guy. Now, as much as I want them to get some starting pitching, I just don't want them to be stupid and go out and sign, like, I know some people brought up Kevin Gausman, who ended up going to Toronto. But Gausman is a guy that's 31, 32 years old, so or 33. So he's older, who had a breakout year out in San Francisco. So that was more of a kind of, I think it might be a, not that he's been a horrible pitcher, but he just hasn't been the guy that was like, oh boy, he commands what he ended up getting, a $100+ million deal. Where I know we're in a different day and age in baseball salaries, but still, that still is a lot to pay for a guy that's probably going to be your third, fourth starter, maybe up there. I mean, it's going to be a good rotation, don't get me wrong, but I just don't think I'm going to buy fully into Gausman. If you gave Gausman more of a 3-4 year deal, 50 to 60 million, I might have been sign him up for that. Steven Matz, he showed some promise, but I'm not really all that impressed. Now, Noah Syndergaard would have been interesting for me. Now, 20 million, $24 million that the Angels are giving him is steep. And he's coming back from Tommy John, and he's always been injured. Now, of course, he's more of a guy that I would have liked just to see them. You give him a short-term deal with, a 1-year deal. Stroman is a guy that just went to the Cubs tonight that I kind of wanted them to go after. But there are a lot of guys out there, though, like I said, the Matzes, the Gausmans, of the Grays, these mid-level pitchers that, yes, it would have been nice, but the money that they're getting is ridiculous for a guy that's going to be a third or fourth starter, or if you're counting on to be a number 2, you're really kind of tossing on the dice there. To me, there really wasn't that true number 1 ace that was out there on this market. There was no, as much as we make fun of them, there was no 2019 Garrett Cole that was a free agent on that staff that the Yankees ended up signing in 2020. So there really wasn't that big fish free. Well, let me take that back. I mean, you have Max Scherzer, but Max Scherzer, I wouldn't call at this point in his career, because he's 37, 38 years old, approaching his 40s here shortly. We're talking about a guy that is getting longer in the tooth, even though to me kind of reminds you of Curt Schilling when the Red Sox brought him in, where he was a veteran starter, still could compete for a Cy Young award, but it's still a guy that you got to be careful with. So paying him $40 million a year, that's a lot of money. Then that was more for the Mets because they have a new ownership that they're kind of want to put that splash out there. To me, what I'm basically getting at here, there's no pitcher, there's no stud number one. It's not like you have a Pedro Martinez, a Roger Clemens in the prime. It's not like Max Scherzer was in his prime out on the market where you're like, I have to give this guy a lot of money. I'm going to do it. There really wasn't that guy that I just had to throw a ton of money at. Now, if you're talking about give me a 1 or a 2 year deal for Justin Verlander, which I was kind of hoping Verlander, that would be a nice veteran to get. Or you go out there, you get a Stroman on a shorter deal, you get somebody that you throw maybe a little bit higher dollars to, maybe $15 to $20 million to. And I'm talking about if you're going to give a guy $20 million to come in for 1 year and you're going to overpay, I at least wanted to be healthy and be ready. So that's why kind of the Syndergaard one was a little tricky there because he's always injured to come back from Tommy John. So, but if you're going to give, if you could have given me one of more of the top of the market starting pitchers and tell me that he's going to be healthy, I'll give him a 1 or 2 year deal and give him higher money to have him come over. So I'm not investing a ton of money into one of these older starters and are going to be regretting probably what the Blue Jays are going to be regretting when they signed that 5-6 year deal for Kevin Gausman. To me, that's not going to age well. You might get 1 or 2 years out of it, but the rest of it's going to be junk. They'll be lucky if they get 1 year out of it because I think Gausman was a 1 year wonder. You're better off just taking all that money, try to maybe spread it out and go find some other starters to bring in to complement with what you already have with Kenta Maeda and then with Barrios as well. So I just think that they might have wasted their money, but hey, that's the Blue Jays, not the Red Sox. Now, am I completely happy with what the Red Sox have done? No, I still think, like I told you, they should call up the Oakland A's and try to get Sean Manaea out of there, and then that would be a nice get for them to have, or look out elsewhere out on the trade market and see what's going to shake free. But of course, the more silent, but actually maybe more major thing that the Red Sox need to get done here, or at least maybe when baseball is back in action after their stupid labor agreements, which we'll get into that here in just a second, that they have to re-sign Rafael Devers and extend Xander Bogaerts, because Bogaerts will opt out after this upcoming season. He said he will opt out. So, or at least that's what he's making it sound like. So it's going to be, those are the imperative things. You can't, after trading Mookie Betts and having 2 other homegrown superstars in Bogaerts and Devers, who just have created a heart of the order along with JD Martinez. That's one of the best in baseball. So you have to make sure that you get these guys signed up. You can't just lose these guys. And if you lose one, I'd rather lose Bogaerts, because I think Devers obviously younger, has got more power, and you did draft that Myers in the first round of this year's draft, who a lot of people said he could be a stud middle of the order hitter himself. But I want to have them both back. And maybe you give Bogaerts that 7-8 year deal, and Rafi, who is obviously 24, going to be 25 here, he's still very, very young, still in the prime of his career, obviously, and still developing, still even getting better. That I think this is a guy where you have to make sure that you get these guys locked up. If anything, I can live with maybe not signing one of these top tier free agents as long as you bring these guys back. Just don't try to be the Tampa Bay Rays of the North. Try to be like what Friedman did when he went out with the Dodgers. Have a good farm system, and then also bring in a lot of these high price free agents that are going to be in their primes that can can bring something to this team. So that's sneakily going to be what the most important thing is for this Red Sox, to make sure they lock up their young core and then bring in these complementary pieces, or bring in something that's missing and to fill that hole. But you have to make sure you have this core signed up long term. Just don't play around with it. Make sure these guys are here to stay. But as we mentioned, Major League Baseball and the Players Association, they, as of midnight tonight, they will officially be in a lockout because they had a 7-minute meeting today, which was a joke, that nothing really happened. And that concludes all the negotiations between baseball and MLB. So they will be in a lockout here. So MLB business will basically be frozen. No teams are going to be offering any contracts. So that's why you saw a flurry of all these moves happen with a lot of these free agents that are out there. So it'll be interesting to see what baseball does. My hunch here is I'm not going to say that there's not going to be baseball next season because that would be depressing. I really hope that doesn't come to that case. I know some people have said it. To me, I think what's going to happen is I think you'll probably see a season that starts in June, maybe around July. You'll get a shortened season. You'll get somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 to 120 games because I just don't have faith in baseball being able to do anything quick at all. I don't think this is going to be as bad as it was during the pandemic shortened season in 2020, but still at the same time, I just seen so much buffoonery between both sides that neither one of them wants to give up, that I'm not going to be surprised if we have a very short 120 game season. If it gets to the point where it's like 60 some odd games, I don't know if maybe they would go through it. They might just axe it at that point. I don't know if they're going to have another one of those short sprint type of seasons. But again, it's going to be disappointing just because I love baseball to death. It was the first sport that I fell in love with, and I still love it to this day. It's baseball and football to me are king. I love them both. I can't get enough of either one of the sports, and it would just be a shame for baseball to have another strike. They've been in pretty good labor. Well, up until the last couple of years, they've been in pretty good labor situation with everything. So they really haven't had much to argue about up until these last couple of years, where things have started to reach a boiling point. Because the last time they had a strike was in '94, and we all know how that went. That really killed the game. And thanks to Barry Bonds, McGuire, and Sosa in the home run chase, and a little juice, that has really really saved the game. And then it's been back on pretty good footing. And then, I mean, obviously, I'm not talking about some of the popularity and like some of the issues as far as speeding up the game, those type of things. But I'm talking about as far as it's been on pretty good footing. They have between the Players Association and the MLB up until probably about 2019 or so is when things started to kind of maybe fall apart here. So hopefully baseball will kind of get it in through their thick skull. Maybe the miracles will happen. They'll get something hammered out here after the holidays, and maybe they can get back to spring training but on time. But I don't think that's going to be the case. I think we'll see a midsummer type of situation where baseball will be back in action at that point. But it'll be interesting. And I hope, like I said, I hope that they don't screw this up. It would be disappointing. And then if we take a quick look at the Boston Bruins, Jacob DeBrusk, who has been a disappointment since he's been drafted. He's had one 20-plus goal season with the Boston Bruins. He has always been a disappointment, and it seems as though there's always been that kind of will to play, will to win type of situation with DeBrusk, where the rest of this team would give their heart and soul and give their left you-know-what to end up winning a Stanley Cup, especially Bergeron, who's played with punctured lungs and broken bones and everything. He and you could say that about probably pretty much everybody else on the roster, but DeBrusk just seems like he needs a lot to motivate him. It's not working out here. I thought they might try to trade him in the offseason, but they kept him around, maybe trying to get one last little spurt of productivity out of him. But he has come out and requested a trade. Now the Bruins and even Taylor Hall and some of his other teammates have mentioned it, that they talked with him and that's not a problem. So it seems like the Bruins are handling this correctly, but what's making this awkward is that his request has happened at like the most awkward time, because the Boston Bruins have lost Brad Marchand to a 3-game suspension because of a slew footing incident, which he did slew foot the guy. He did slew foot the Vancouver player. Now, you can argue if it deserved 3 games or maybe just should have been 1 game, but he did slew foot him, so which was surprising for a guy that's really cleaned up his act. And I mean, he's skill-wise, he's one of the best players in the NHL. He's a top 15 scorer, top 10 scorer in the league. So he's along with his teammate David Pastrnak. So you can put those two guys up in the upper echelons of NHL scorers, but Brad Marchand for some reason has had some I don't know why he ended up doing this again. He cleaned up a lot of this over the last 3 or 4 years, and then this came back to rear its ugly head. But to tie it into the DeBrusk situation, he's suspended, and then on top of that, the Providence Bruins have had a COVID outbreak, so you can't go and call anybody up from Providence right now because they've had so many guys that have gotten COVID that it's just not worth it. So that's a scary situation. So DeBrusk is being forced to at least play. Last night he played on that 4th line. So he's at least being a good soldier about it, but it's just an awkward situation where you have a guy. It's not even like N'Keal Harry, because Harry, when he requested a trade, it seemed like he kind of got the verbal slap around maybe in the offseason where it was kind of like, all right, kid, and blah, 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 blah. And he is not even anywhere close to the disappointment that DeBrusk has been. And trust me, N'Keal Harry has been a complete bust, but it just shows you what the Bruins thought that they were going to get in Jacob DeBrusk, because he played a lot on the second line. You thought you were going to get a more consistent scorer. So it's been really difficult to see the lack of production from Jacob DeBrusk. But now, because of the situation, he's being forced to play. And then, of course, probably once Marchand comes back, you might have that situation where you're at least able to make it through the situation. And then once Providence clears up, you could try to trade him away. But the only situation where I could see them trading him away is if they get an NHL player back in return for the trade, because they need somebody to fill a body, basically, to fill that line spot. So right now, I don't think anything's going to happen. And I think chemistry-wise, I think everything else has been pretty good with the Boston Bruins, because you see even the 2 goaltenders are having a good time with each other. The rest of the team, I mean, they have good leadership with Patrice Bergeron, and you've had a lot of guys that have been around, Brad Marchand, and even David Pastrnak, he was younger, but he's been around since 2015. So he's been a pretty good influence here. So they have good chemistry in the locker room outside of DeBrusk. So I don't think this is going to really affect them as some people might think it would. So we'll see how this all pans out here for the Boston Bruins as we move along here in the season. Now, as we close things out here in the show, we'll do a quick episode of Fantasy Blitz. As, of course, as a lot of you that play fantasy football right now know, it has not been the year to have a stud running back, as Derrick Henry to Dalvin Cook to Ezekiel Elliott to you name it. A lot of those stud running backs are either out for the season, or they've been dealing with injuries off and on, or you name it, it's happened. So, of course, we all know Christian McCaffrey and Henry are the 2 big ones. McCaffrey just went on the season-ending IR. Derrick Henry, for fantasy purposes, is done for the year. So it's been a train wreck with the stud running backs, and obviously Saquon Barkley hasn't looked at himself. So it's been a mess. So we'll take a look at some of those fantasy running back emergency ads for this week and running down the stretch to your fantasy playoffs, which should be coming up here in a couple weeks, unless you went on the old schedule where next week is your fantasy playoffs. But for most people with the 17 games now, it switched over to week 15, 16 for for weeks 14 through 16 for your fantasy playoffs instead of 13 through 15. Anyways, as we look here at your fantasy running back ads, we'll take a look here at the close to home with the New England Patriots with Ramondre Stevens. Now, if he's still available, because he's rostered in 61% of Yahoo leagues, so he's still out there available. As I'm not sure about the ESPN and the other leagues that are out there, but there's still, if you're in one of those leagues where if he's still available, if you're in one of those more shallow leagues, the 8-team, 6-team league, one of those where you're dealing with some injuries, or if you're in a 10-team league, 12-team league where for some reason he's still out there and he's still available, go and pick up Ramondre Stevens. As we talked about, he's a physical guy. He can catch some balls. Now, it is a running back committee in New England. We know that. But the good thing is, what some fantasy experts or quote unquote experts have gone away from is the Patriots play that running back committee. They've gotten scared by it in the past. But if you've been watching the Patriots, they give them a pretty equal. Every other series it's Harris, and every other series then it's Ramondre Stevens. And the Atlanta game was the perfect game to watch for how well that could go, because both of them were running well. And if it wasn't for a few holding penalties, Ramondre Stevens would have had a pretty big night, even for only having in the Atlanta game. He ended up having, give me 1 second here. He had 12 rushing attempts for 69 yards in that Atlanta game, and 1 catch for 6 yards. So again, remember, if that one run didn't get called back, he's probably having close to a 100-yard game and a chance to punch it in. So that's a pretty solid. And remember, these are guys you have to pick up because of a lack of your studs being out there. So before you turn your nose up at it, remember, these are guys that you have to add because of injuries to other players, or taking a chance on a guy. And again, he's starting, like, if you haven't hit the train now, you better make sure that tonight you pick him up, because I would imagine that 61% probably is going to start to jump up, especially after this Buffalo week, where Buffalo just, to me, against good to great anything above good backs, they're really they're going to get gouged against. It's those lesser running backs that they've been able to handle. But I think the punch of Harris and Stevenson is going to be too much for Buffalo to handle. And with two games against Buffalo here to end out the season, we're talking about 2 opportunities, and one's going to be in the playoffs for your fantasy team in week 16. So if you're able to make it to that championship round, you have Ramondre Stevenson, who has an opportunity here to put up some good numbers here for you. And I'm not talking just about a filling guy. I think you have an opportunity to get a guy who's got some good numbers coming down the stretch anyways, and to look at next year. And then we'll go over to Chuba Hubbard. So Chuba Hubbard, who if he's been bouncing back and forth in your fantasy league because possibly you had your Christian McCaffrey owner in the beginning of the year when Christian McCaffrey was dealing with injuries, had him, dropped them, and kind of gone on that carousel. So if you're sorry about that, lost a little connection here to the internet, so that was kind of strange. Okay, so if your Christian McCaffrey owner hasn't gone and picked him up yet, which I don't know why he wouldn't have, but if he hasn't, then go and pick up Chuba Hubbard. Remember, this is not just for this week because their Panthers are on a bye, but we're talking about this week, playoffs, getting into that home stretch. Chuba Hubbard's going to take up the lead role here down in Carolina. Now, he's not anywhere close to Christian McCaffrey, but that's still a Carolina team that they rely more on the run than they do on the pass, especially now with Cam Newton at quarterback. So Chuba Hubbard is a guy that you're going to have to make sure that you add him on your team. He's going to be that lead back here for Carolina. And then finally, a guy that Patriots fans saw last weekend in Donta Foreman. Now, Foreman is a guy that had over 100 yards rushing last week. He's a pretty physical back. He's got to deal with some ball security issues, but he is a guy that Tennessee, they did cut Adrian Peterson, and it's pretty much Foreman and Felton as well that you're dealing with. So both of those backs would be viable there with the Tennessee Titans, but I would go down to Foreman, more of the power back that's got more rushing touchdown opportunities there. So if you're looking for one guy to add, I would go with Foreman in this situation, where last week Foreman had 109 yards on the ground, one catch for 3 yards. So we're talking about a guy here who has some opportunities now without Adrian Peterson. So this could be a situation where you actually might end up getting a steal here going down the stretch if one of your stud running backs has been lost for the year. So that will do it here for this episode of the New England Sports Weekly. Now, as always, remember to follow me on Twitter or on Instagram at the handle you can see here at Sean_Met28. Or you can follow the show's account on Twitter at NE Sports Weekly. Remember to always send me any questions, comments, anything that you want. And remember that we always film the show live on Wednesday nights from 8 o'clock. We usually go about an hour to 1 hour and a half. So always have some fun. Always look forward to having you guys in the comment section and sending out those comments and replies. And always remember on YouTube, hit that like and subscribe button. Keep up for the notifications for when the show is going to pop up, or if there's any special events that we have coming up. And the show is also available on Spotify and on SoundCloud. Always hit that like and subscribe there as well. Definitely make sure you subscribe to the show on Spotify and SoundCloud. You can listen to the show anytime, anywhere, in your car, out for a jog, doing whatever household chores or whatever weird things that you do during the weekend. Keep yourself entertained, listen to the show. Until next week, I've been Sean Metcalf, and you have a good one and enjoy your holidays, folks.